welcome to Movie Vault 666. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be looking at a staple of made-for-TV movies, the quote-unquote true haunting paranormal film. These stories are cranked out all the time based on books published about supposed hauntings, and whilst the purpose of today's review is not to argue the validity of any claims that such hauntings have occurred, it may come as no shock that I'm somewhat of a skeptic, and as such we'll be reviewing the film, not questioning whether the depiction of the haunting is accurate, but whether it is entertaining. So with that out of the way, today's film is called Grave Secrets, and is based on tales told by former residents of a location called Hilltop Drive, where residents were allegedly driven from their homes by ghosts, and in particular, a book called Black Hope Horror, written by Ben and Jean Williams, two previous residents of Hilltop Drive. And so with that said, let's prepare to witness something that baffles the human mind, as we watch Grave Secrets, The Legend of Hilltop Drive. The film begins with our main characters, Jean and Shag, being shown around a site for a house in an area called Section 12. And as you can see, this place even comes with its own plot point. With the house brought off screen, the old couple are free to employ a whole fleet of people to move their masses of stuff into their giant mansion. This throng also includes their daughter Tina and her fiancé Daryl. They discuss their other daughter Gayla, who is more of a tearaway than her sister, but they are interrupted by the appearance of a spooky man with a shovel, who disappears during a brief distraction.
It looks like he's praying.
Look out!
You okay? Yeah, I don't know how it got away like that.
The characters meet the neighbours, and it has to be said it's actually quite nice to watch a film where the characters are actually effortlessly likeable. But this is a horror movie, so we quickly cut to Jean as she stands alone in the kitchen when things get inexplicably cold, and the cameraman's breathing gets heavy. However, as it's that time in a horror film for fake-outs, the expectations of the audience are subverted.
I think we got lucky. They seem like awfully nice people.
You didn't turn on the air conditioner, did you?
Nope. Look behind you.
However, something wicked this way comes, as the other daughter Gayla arrives with her own child Carly, looking to dump her with the folks, so she can go away with her new man to Europe.
What did you want to ask us?
What happened is this. I met this guy. He's a musician, but he's incredibly talented, very bright, and he works very hard.
He's got no money. Haven't we been through this before?
He wants me to go to Europe with him. He thinks he can make a go of it in Germany.
Now, wait a minute, young lady. I am not paying a dime for you to go traipsing off through Europe with someone.
I never asked you to.
Just let her finish what she's saying.
I know what's coming.
You don't either.
We go through this every time we see her.
I have never asked you to watch Carly for me.
You want Carly to stay with us?
I can't take her with me.
Oh, wait a minute here. I thought you wanted to ask us for something.
I'm asking you to take Carly for me.
Honey, that's not asking us for anything. I mean, that's giving us a gift. You know how we feel about Carly.
It's just you we can't stand. We also get the return of the cameraman and his heavy breathing, and Tina struggles with the real villain of the movie, the plumbing. With Gayla gone to Germany and Tina living with her husband, Carly is left with Shag and Jean. But when Jean tries to put her to bed, she comes out with some odd comments.
Can you stay with me till I fall asleep?
There's no room.
Please.
There's nothing to be afraid of, Carly. You got all your friends here. I'll leave the door open.
No. Close the door.
You want the door closed?
That way the shadows can't come in.
What shadows?
The ones in the hallway.
There's nothing in the hallway, Carly. I'll close the door if that's what you want.
And this time it's Jean who has to contend with the plumbing.
What the hell? Come on, door.
So there's something weird in their neighbourhood. Who are they going to call?
I'll call the contractor. I have to call him anyway about the plumbing.
But the contractors never came, and the toilet kept them up all night.
But if that weren't enough mild nuisances, the temperature is all over the place, and bugs get in through the window. I don't know if my heart can take much more of this unbelievable tension. However, the next day something less silly happens, when Tina is taken to hospital and diagnosed with an unspecified type of cancer.
Swing didn't do it. It spread way beyond that.
Where did this come from? She was perfectly healthy.
I can't say.
It's alright, you can tell us. Anyway, to cut a long story short, Tina is discharged despite still being very ill and comes to live with her parents, because that's a great idea. Once again, Carly alludes to keeping them out by closing the door and seemingly knowing more than she's let on. Probably just coincidence. However, shadows do appear. Either that or the room just wet itself, and we close on Tina panicking. So meanwhile, Carly and her friends talk to a streetlight using its blinking to count as yes or no answers, which in this film I guess is like showing that she's been corrupted, as faulty electronics are pretty much one of the main villains in this film.
Carly, time to come in.
I'll be right there.
What are you doing?
Talking to the streetlight. We're asking it questions. If it blinks once, it means yes. If it blinks twice, it means no.
When it stays on like that, it means it's time to come in.
Streetlight, are you the devil? And whilst this is going on, Tina's condition continues to deteriorate. But Jean doesn't want her going back into the hospital, not that I know why she ever left. Perhaps bed rest and a can-do attitude was the 80s answer to cancer. But there are a million different hilariously mundane things going wrong at the same time, one of which is that Jean continues feeling the temperature rise and fall mysteriously. However, things intensify when Jean believes that she hears an intruder in the house, so Shag suits up like John McClane and the two head downstairs and find that the birds have been killed seemingly by insects. At which point, Tina stirs and cries out, leading to her being sent back to the hospital, at which point she's suddenly cured?
So you're optimistic, Doc.
Don't worry, it normally takes people a couple of guesses to figure out what emotion I'm displaying. So yes, Tina makes a miraculous recovery as soon as she leaves the house. Although if it's to do with the house, then I'm not sure why she didn't get better the first time she left to go to the hospital, but whatever. And not only is she leaving the hospital, her and Daryl are getting married, although we never see it. And just like that, it's Christmas, and Carly receives a cat named Ginger. But some of the neighbours arrive, an unmistakable evil omen reminds us that all is not well.
Are you okay?
I'm kind of tired.
Oh, it's just the holidays. You know, they wear me out.
Did you hear that?
What?
The toilet just flushed.
And after a scene discussing the toilet flushing, and even a contractor coming out to explain why the toilet can't flush by itself, and no, I am not fucking kidding, Shag returns home to find an eerie presence within the garage. And... what looks and sounds like a Lamb of God performance. Discuss their problems, and Jean suggests the possibility of ghosts, while Shag denies the possibility of any supernatural elements. So when Tina comes round and hears Jean's list of problems, she suggests the exact same thing that would save so many characters in horror films.
Well, if it's really that bad, why don't you just sell it and get out? And maybe the house is just a lemon.
We thought about it. But the market is so far down, we'd lose a fortune if we try to get out now.
Yeah, we always have the cabin in Montana.
You ever tried to spend a winter in Montana?
Wow, this entity must feel so bad. I mean, it's been haunting these people for must be days now, driving them insane, and yet the idea of living in Montana is 1,000 times less bearable. You know, I know that most of the haunting so far has just consisted of flushing, but still, ouch. Jean starts investigating the pepper tree from earlier, when suddenly the entire house starts to shake. However, it turns out to be a digger coming to dig a pool for one of the neighbours. However, the spooky man Jean saw just after moving in arrives, and objects to them digging in the area as it is sacred ground, and even mentions that there are bodies buried in the garden. Although when they mention this to the driver, the man has already disappeared.
Wait a minute. Man over there said there are 2 bodies buried back here. What man? Where'd he go?
I have no idea.
With all of these strange occurrences, Jean decides to go to the source and finds the woman who owned the land originally. Now, the woman has information about the land the Williamses chose to build their house on, claiming that Black Hope Section 12 to be a land given to black slaves who used it as a graveyard. Still, at least it wasn't a Native American graveyard. I hear worse happens than just toilet flushing. Having assembled the neighbours, they all have stories about minor spiritual inconveniences. However, all of this proves to be too much for some.
I'm sorry. I'm concerned about the impact of all this on property value. But if you want to turn this into some sort of poltergeist phenomenon, you can just count me out.
I mean, you could be forced to live in Montana. Now, with the town up in arms about the bodies, the film takes a weird shift and out of nowhere turns into a legal film for some reason, as the family whose property the bodies were discovered on reveal that they attempted to sue the development company, who in turn countersued them for harassment. Unperturbed, Gene and Shag tried to put together a case of their own, but the whole system is stacked against them.
Well, while we're waiting to find out, let's put the house on the market. I don't care at this point if we lose some money. I just want to get out.
I understand, but I must advise you are legally obligated to tell prospective buyers that the house might be situated over a graveyard.
Nobody told us that.
Developers claim they didn't know.
Nobody's going to buy a house built on a graveyard. And we can't afford to buy a second house while we're still paying for this one.
Let's do this. We draft a letter to the title company taking the position that the undisclosed cemetery is a material breach of warranty under your chain of title.
Meaning?
If they accept that position, they could either relocate the bodies and have the cemetery declared legally abandoned, which is a very costly venture, or they could pay back your entire investment, plus interest on the money and moving costs. Either way, they'll have to pay your attorney's fees, plus compensation for time and mental anguish.
With all of the stress building up at this point, the characters have had several scenes of venting where appropriate. But one of the more bizarre sequences occurs when Gene explains about a relative who died in strange circumstances.
You remember what happened when my grandpa died?
One that got hit by a train?
His dog knew the instant he died. That dog started howling the most pitiful howl at the exact same moment, and he was 500 miles away. Now, how do you explain that?
That really happened like that.
I was right there. I remember they sent back one of his shoes. Still had a toe in it.
Must have been about this size.
Does Shag always get hungry when people mention death? I guess if something actually happens in this movie, maybe we'll find out. So more time passes by with extremely mild phenomena occurring, such as a divining rod shooting out of Carly's hand, the cat running away, and a mysterious black stain appearing in the bathroom before a bird begins pecking at the window, which is explained to be a bad omen earlier in the film. The latter coincides with the revelation that instead of paying the people affected off, the housing developers intend to simply remove the two bodies in response to the neighbourhood's complaints, saying that no one can prove that there are more bodies to be found on the land. In fact, the company also writes a letter explaining that no one is allowed to disturb buried bodies as it's against the law, that anyone wishing to sell their house would have to inform potential buyers the house may be built on a cemetery. Gene decides that it may be possible to make a case based on witness reports about the supposed cemetery, and begins the plan of randomly driving up to black people and questioning them about the cemetery, which somewhat surprisingly does lead them to a witness.
Do you know about the cemetery?
Sure. I dug some of the graves.
Were there any grave markers or landmarks?
No headstones. Just a 1x6 plank and maybe a cinder block. But there was one thing you might find, old pepper tree. Had some kind of carving on it.
An arrow.
Could be.
What does the carving mean?
Oh, just a grave marker like any other. There are two sisters buried there. Ellie McWilliams and Josephine Miller.
So the tree is definitely in the cemetery.
Oh, if you find that pepper tree, you'll smack dab in the middle of the cemetery.
So following some more appliance-themed spookiness, almost the whole neighbourhood is in the process of trying to sell up, including the Williamses. However, good news arrives when it turns out that the title company is sending someone to investigate their claims, and Ginger returns pregnant. In fact, it's baby season as Tina is giving birth, and Carly and Jean prepare to go see the newborn. However...
Oh, God, I hope she's going to be all right. She's been through so much. Don't touch them! They're a baby!
Someone actually thought this had to be included in the film, even though it's wildly off balance from the rest of the tone of the film, and no one even mentions it again. People don't even look sad in the next scene. It's like it never happened. So with Tina announcing a minor scare with a heart, which I'm sure won't come up again, everything's great, until...
It'd be worse if they used the toilets and didn't flush.
Yes, it's nearly the end of the movie, so the ghosts begin making inexplicable, although at least more interesting stuff happen.
Carly!
recent activity, the inspector sent out to investigate turns out to be out to discredit the Williamses, and this leaves the Williamses' legal case completely scuppered.
His report says there's no definitive proof that the cemetery exists. He says the markings on the tree could have been made by kids playing cowboys and Indians. He also claims that you told him you heard rumors about the cemetery before buying the property.
What? We didn't know about it.
I mean, even if we did, why would we tell him?
You wouldn't.
Then why would he say we did?
The more sticky they can make it, the longer they can keep it tied up in court.
They're gonna lose in the end.
There ain't gonna be an end.
What does that mean?
It means you're dealing with a company with unlimited resources. If that's the game they want to play, they can afford to play it a lot longer than you can.
But Jean hasn't given up yet, and in a fit of anger decides to dig up the bodies in the back garden in order to settle things once and for all. However, the more she digs, the more birds arrive, until there's only one solution.
He wants to get up the backyard.
However, Tina arrives, and a weak heart that wasn't going to come up again comes up again.
We paid for this land. We bought it. And I'm not gonna suffer for somebody else's mistake. Or dishonesty.
This is crazy, Mom. Stop
Take
it!
it easy, Tina. You're supposed to take it easy.
Mom, you don't know what you're doing. Get out of here!
The shot causes a fatal heart attack, which Jean is too busy digging and ranting to acknowledge. Although at least the whole affair provides a purpose for Jean's story from earlier, as the baby cries as if in knowledge of its mother's death. The whole experience ends up being too much for the family, and they make the tough decision to move out, and to make matters worse, probably to Montana. And as Shag and Jean grieve, we cut to the next scene as they bid farewell to the remaining neighbours, and the film ends with a typical text scroll accompanied by fittingly bland music. And so that was Grave Secrets, and it's a hard film to recommend, but a harder one to hate. The film is at times quite charming, primarily due to the great performances by Patty Duke and David Selby as Jean and Shag respectively. Most of the rest of the acting is mixed, but it's unusual to watch a horror film and genuinely like the main characters. It's also nice that the film doesn't rely on cheap jump scares. However, the problem with that is that it hardly relies on any scares at all. Most of the attempts at spookiness is so incredibly mundane that it actually ends up being comical. And towards the end, the scares become unexplainable. I mean, what is this about, for instance? The stakes are also made to seem comically low when not only is half the film spent with uninteresting scenes concerning the legal case which break up any small amount of tension, but also the family could have left at any point if they could put up with the cold winters. Now this film is based on a book which I haven't read, so perhaps many of these issues are due to trying to stay true to the book. But watching it just as a film, it is very hard to recommend aside from to people with a deep interest in supposed real-life haunting. Overall, the film is extremely inoffensive. The acting saves the film, but it won't live long in the memory, unless you have an extremely severe phobia of flushing toilets, or Montana. Anyway, until next time, I've been Chris, and I'll see you next time on Movie Vault 6.